So, Cuffy Proctor here to discuss Andrew Yang and libertarianism, what it means to be a libertarian that votes for Andrew Yang. Now, you could say that if you vote for Andrew Yang, you're not really a libertarian because you're voting for Democrats. But I think that this is something that's being accentuated in the libertarian community as to what constitutes a real libertarian, whether we're pushing people out because their views aren't exactly the same. And does that make us any better than the partisans? And I think the answer is no. I do believe taxation is theft. Absolutely. But whereas that money is already stolen, you aren't going to change the system overnight, right? But how to change something incrementally versus revolutionarily, I think, is the argument. And I'm not, saying that I like the idea of changing the means of control or production, rather. I think that that's exactly what socialism is. Redistribution of appropriated theft money is still redistribution of appropriated theft money. Taxation is theft. You're taking something from somebody by the use of force or the threat of force. So when you say that you're going to take taxes from robots, where's the threat? And I think that that's the concern that in the discussion comes down to. Is the threat to the corporations? Well, are corporations people? The answer is no, they aren't. They are not people. And no individual is harmed by the threat of violence if they don't comply. We've seen this with the Wall Street bailouts and all those things. No one's held to accountability to that extent. And maybe they should be. Maybe that's a different argument. But we're talking about small potatoes here in the grand scheme of things, in a discussion of rebalancing. So are we talking about incrementally changing things or doing it overnight? If you were to say incrementally, well, UBI is very similar to a negative income tax as long as it's not coming off of the taxpayer. And whether you've done your research or not, i.e. you libertarians who constantly call me not a real libertarian, I really dare you to dig into what it means to have a negative income tax, what it means to be taking those funds and redistributing them, because you're right, they're not funds, it's theft. But how do we change that? How do we eliminate theft? And I think that that's the goal, believe it or not. And I think that's why a lot of libertarians like the idea of Andrew Yang. A lot of conservatives like the idea of Andrew Yang, is because he's meeting across those party lines, because he thinks logically and he thinks in numbers and math and science. And that, at the end of the day, not condescension, but facts and knowledge is what separates us as the real opportunity here. I think it's facts versus feelings, right? But that applies on both sides, left and right. You can say that all day when it comes to gender biology or global warming or whatever. There are both sides of the arguments where we are, if you're a Democrat, you're not really following through to the whole science fact thing, and then same vice versa. I think it can go both ways. We need to search in ourselves and start asking really tough questions, and that's what can bring us together in such a fractured part of society. Because if we don't figure it out, it's curtains. The Roman Empire lasted a hell of a lot longer than this, and they weren't nearly as volatile up until this point. Now, granted, you could say a lot of things about progress and technology and how that impacts things, but as time goes on, we're going to find that libertarianism is going to have to factor in some things that Ayn Rand didn't or couldn't conceptualize, and that's automation. AI, the advent of these technologies is going to fundamentally change our economy, our government, our lives, and we need to get out in front of it. We're not good at that. We're historically bad at it. So I think that we can do pretty much anything we put our mind to as a species, but there's a lot of complacency. And I think that that's where this comes in, is whether you agree on all of politics of somebody like Andrew Yang or not is not the most relevant. I think what's the best way away from the political divisiveness and to divert the money from bureaucracy and wasteful spending programs back into our pockets, where we can generate that money from consumer growth and wealth, which is the whole point of a free market society. Inflation is a good argument, but I dare any libertarian to really dig into the facts. Watch the debate between Jeff Myron and Andrew Yang, and I think that there's a lot of telling things on our understanding of libertarianism, or objective realism, or objectivism, whatever you call it. And I think that it's going to change some perspectives, certainly with the libertarians, because they start to look at it. So you're right. Money is going back into our hands. And if we're not being taxed $1,000 a month, then it's money. It's a negative income tax. At the end of the day, it's your taxes back to you. And as long as it's not on the backs of hardworking Americans and from corporations, which are not people, that are generating already basically wealth that's going to an entity that isn't a person. It's going to a corporation, which doesn't really exist. I don't think that's a bad thing. I don't think billionaires are a bad thing. I think that corporations that run amok with really nobody controlling it, just kind of capitalism for the sake of capitalism, that's great. I mean, free market capitalism is what we're going for. I definitely think that that's where we need to be, but we also need to have some safeguards and not let it go off the rails either. Now, I'm not suggesting that we control it by controlling the markets. That doesn't work. Free markets are the answer for sure. And it will correct itself. But when you say free markets, you really mean free markets. It means no government control over insulin. It means no government control over any of the monopolies that could create and destroy themselves, which also means anti-corruption. Monopolies can't squash out the smaller people using aggression. So there are some things there that you need to be navigated when we discuss these different ideas and directions, and it's not overnight. And I guess that's my point, is that these things are very multifaceted. We really have to analyze it from more perspectives than just who's going to pay for the roads or taxation is theft, period. Like, I understand both of those arguments. But the fact is that there is the money there to spend money on something like a safeguard to prevent major income inequality. And I don't mean in the way of the Bernie Sanders income inequality. I mean in the way of it costs our society money when people are poor or in jail or in hospitals because they're poor. It's more money that's being spent, and ultimately it's not being done in the way of voluntarism. And we could get to voluntarism, but it's not something you do overnight. And I think that that's things that we don't think about often as libertarians, or even Democrats. If you're a Democrat or a liberal, you can have all the opinions and feelings, perspectives of your being right, and whether you are or not is unimportant. What is important is how do you get there? I'll leave you that, I guess. Thank you for your time, and if you can, subscribe and spread the word to other like-minded people, or maybe not like-minded people if they're open-minded. Thanks again.